we're at the gold belly again. So yesterday's video was a few dents in the bonnet, and then you know what I said, it was after developing a bit of a rocker cover leak. You can see it's a little bit wet here and there, and one thing I like to do every now and again is checking the valve clearance. So it's definitely getting loads of oil up here. It's very obvious. That's good. Oil feels good. And I do like to just check the torque on the head as well. I torqued this 3 times after I did work on the head. If they're all pulling nice there, there's no need to go taking off, I don't think, these, just to check the other few there. They all look to be very good, so I wouldn't be surprised. It's not leaking, the head gasket isn't leaking out, so it's just a quick check. And if any of them were loose, I would take off the rocker cover, the rocker shaft, and I would torque them all. So another thing I like to check is just that these are all snug before we do valve clearance. My set of feeler gauges I've had to replace because the numbers on them have faded, and I just don't trust that I did it 100% right, because I've noticed there's very little tappet sound in the engine. It's a little bit tight, especially that one there. Now that's too tight. So when I went and looked again at my feeler gauge other set, I said no. So I have invested in a new set, and all of the numbers and everything on them there is they're all nice and clear. Says he who can't get a camera to focus, but you can take my word for it, I can read them. So this is a little bit different of a rocker shaft to the 20 TVO in petrol, being it has aluminium alloy lads there, and that was an improvement over the kind of cast steel that was on the Ferguson 20 TVO and diesel, because the cast steel ones tended to crack a lot. So it's good just to take a quick look and make sure. And there's a little bolt there as well that I do like to tighten up, or at least check to make sure it's tight every now and again. So it's a little bit bigger than that, lad. That's okay. Just make sure he's snug, because apparently the oil pressure can drop an awful lot if he's grand. If that is loose, and as we've seen in the 20 diesel we were working on not too long ago, that was very loose and about to fall out. So right, now we've got to look at our rotor arm. And I think there's holes in the flywheel like in this engine as well, like the TVO 20, that will allow that screwdriver, the 1/4-inch screwdriver, to go into them when it's exactly at the top dead centre on a particular cylinder. So we'll make sure we're not in gear. I think we could be. There we are, yeah. So it's just since the rocker cover was leaking, I said I'd bring it right round to number 1. And the rocker cover was leaking, I said I'd take, since the engine in the 20 TVO I'm working on is going for a rebuild. So that's our timing mark for number 1. Cylinder number 1. So based on that, we know that them 2 valves have to be Dunta. They have to be closed. Oh God, yeah. What was I thinking? Well, I suppose I wasn't thinking. It was the fact that with our feeder gauges, I actually had to scratch them with a pick to mark them. But of course, the problem being, they get marked anyway from use, and I must have thought that I had the right one when I obviously didn't. So yeah, let's just go now and loosen these off a lot and just start from the start and go through it. So we have an exhaust valve and we have an inlet valve. So the exhaust valve is first, and that is 12 thousandths of an inch And I'm going to go and do a nice, just snuggish, not tight. Some people now that are doing these engines up for a long time will tell you just set out from the 15 thousandths of an inch. And that's what they do. And I've heard that. More than one person say that. 15 thousandths of an inch. Now considering the inlet valves are only meant to be 10, I would imagine the engine will sound very tappety. But they seem to think that it means you definitely won't have, when things start expanding with heat, like your push rods and everything else really, you definitely won't have a valve stuck open due to it being pushed down and the valve clearance being too tight. So another feel of that there. Yeah, that's just nice now, so it is. So 10 thousandths for the inlet here. I'm going to put this down as a general maintenance. Something I do like to keep on top of. Don't have to do it anymore with the way engines are gone, of course. But years ago it was just something that I think had to be done, and the engine will thank you for it. We'll just call a feeler gauge, so we just give it a feel. Try to keep it flat. I try to keep them flat. Otherwise they're bent. It'll give you a kind of a false reading. So we can go just a little bit more on that. Yeah, I'll hold it about there and nip it up. So you've probably seen me do loads of these videos on valve clearance, but it's just something. I remember when I was younger hanging around my own dad doing this, and I always admired his sense of feel when it came to the feeler gauges. And that's exactly what I want to do here. Just develop my own little sense. Yeah. Sometimes these will wear a little bit uneven because the valve stem is thinner than the rocker there. So to get a good feel of it, I sometimes find you have to just kind of go in as straight as you can. And that seems to be what I would call a loose 10,000. But sometimes if you don't put the screwdriver in and you just give this a bit of a nip, it can just turn it ever so slightly into a nice 10,000. So we're going to go with that. And we'll be turning the engine over fully and going through all of this again. The full cycle of 1, 3, 4, 2 in the firing order. So that's number 1 done. So now we're going to go towards number 3. And we're starting to go in there now. Okay, so number 3. Yeah, they're just too tight. It sounded lovely and quiet, but I just don't like. So that other set of feeler gauges is now in the recycling bin where it belongs, because just can't read them. And I remember having to use the vernier calipers then to try and figure out which one's which. So that's not good. So what do we know? This is a 10 thou, yeah, so we're doing the inlet first. The secret with this is to not go too tight. Simple as that. Have to be able to slide that feeler gauge in and out handy. Otherwise, you'll just end up scratching to bits, and it'll end up that 10,000 feeler gauge won't be 10,000 of an inch anymore. It'll actually be less. So. That is about. So it's tightening as I tighten the lock nut. So loosen it spin it back a bit, and then nip it. That's what I find you've got to try and find the sweet spot sometimes. A little bit more. If in doubt, have it a little bit too loose. It will expand and all of that, and with heat, and it'll tighten it up a little bit for you. It's nice work. Everyone probably has their own feel when it comes to it. Sometimes I find it's hard to hold the screwdriver when you're tightening the lock nut. It'll just keep going with it, and you've just got to try and stop it from doing that. Yeah, that's acceptable. So that's number 3 done. So we'll move on now to number 4. 1, 3, 4. Okay, we'll take our screwdriver out as well. I like to put the screwdriver in. It makes it kind of foolproof. 3. So come on. There we go. Loosen the lock nut, loosen the adjuster. Lovely. Do the exhaust first, being 12 thousandths of an inch. Try and get him in straight. You don't have to be too fussy, but too loose is better than too tight. And this engine is a little bit warm because the engine for that 20 TVO is in the transfer box, so we were loading it up. But that was about an hour ago, so it wasn't running for very long. But should really be doing this cold, but that's why I'm going a little bit snug. I'm taking into account things are just a little bit warm, that's all. Tomorrow morning will be the best time to do this. Tomorrow morning I'll be working, so now we'll do fine, but just I'm going to go a little bit, and have been going a little bit on the snug side of the feeling. Lovely, and our 10 thousandths down in here. And 3, 4. One more cylinder to do after this. Turn the engine over then. Have a feel of that. Yeah, just nice. Okay, 1, 3, 4, and the door is last. Okay, so watch the rotor arm. So we've gone past the hole in the flywheel, so we'll bring it right around. I presume there's a hole for number 2. There we go. Right. So we have a 10,000 here on the intake manifold. How these help vaporize the TVO is the intake manifold and the exhaust are obviously in the same cast, and so the exhaust heats the intake. And the petrol engine ones, the petrol only, you'll see there's a bit of a gap between the, more of a gap between the intake and the exhaust manifolds, and that allows a bit of cooling to go on. A certain amount of heat in the intake is fine and probably needed, you're going to get it anyway, but not the amount of heat you see in these TVO manifolds. They heat up awful quick. I'm very happy with the oil anyway. You can see up here it's clean. It's still good and thick. I use Miller's engine oil. It's a bit more expensive, but I think it deserves it. Been around long enough. Of course, what I like about these petrol and kerosene engines is you can take off the fuel tank, put it back on. You don't have to bleed fuel system like you do on a diesel engine. You don't have to bleed the air out of it. Yeah, so let's see if we can get that. Let's tighten up the slightest bit there. But the rule of thumb, most important thing, is not to go too tight. You still have to be able to use your feeler gauge to feel. If it's dragging and getting caught and you have to pull it hard to get it out, it's too tight. Check them for a nip and make sure the adjuster isn't turning. Take out our screwdriver now so we don't forget. Lovely. So that is it basically, as you've seen before. That is all it is. I'm just going to turn the engine over, do a full rotation and recheck. I like to use copper washers on there so that it seals and it stops moisture going in, because when I lifted this off it was lovely and clean and there was no moisture on it at all. So I put that down to it being sealed, because if you only put split washer or spring washer on that, you can end up with a split in the spring washer allowing moisture in and allowing oil out as well. I put a new gasket on as well. I don't go too crazy tightening these up now. About that. Okay, that's looking good. Right, we have the breather pipe as well. What I like to do with these is give them a blowout and make sure that they're clear. They're important and they go down onto the inlet manifold there. That helps keep your engine cleaner because it'll suck some of the moist, oily vapours into the intake and burn it. So be careful, it's a fine thread, so I don't want to go wrecking the threads, because to retread that you'd have to take off the whole manifold for fear that you would end up having the engine suck in the bits of metal from retreading. So that has been a little bit awkward there. Still, we'll get it by hand. We'll get it started by hand. There you go. Lovely. And then we can start putting this back on. I use rubber Doughty washers on these. And as I tighten, I just keep everything lined up. Okay. The pipe sometimes likes to spring forward, so it's no harm in trying to keep a bit of pressure on it backwards. You have something you can put a bit of pressure on with as you're tightening. Keep everything lined up in the middle. When you're happy, give them a nip. Like that, or something similar. So that's good. Ready now to lift on the fuel tank and then give this a start and see does it sound any different. I'm sure it will. Okay. Now, that's good. And the front gets a coach bolt. So it's got to lift it. It goes into the thermostat housing, so that's okay. On the back, it goes into the battery, kind of onto the battery tray there. Okay. Now what I find with this engine, the straps for the battery, keeping it in the bracket, pulls it forward a little bit out, stops it lining up. So you just remove that. And we did a bit of work on these bolts before in the past, and they're the ones that have the little point in them, and it makes it a little bit easier to get them lined up. Because there's captive nuts in there, same with this one. So it just makes life a little bit easier. And I went for longer ones as well than what was originally fitted, so that you have that little bit more space to work with. Okay, no point going too tight. So we get the other one in. And we've got a rubber pad under there as well. So to get all of that in, lined up. Because there's a point on the bolt, it lines up really easy every single time. So it's very, very handy if you have some of them bolts lying around. So just fine thread, 1/2 inch head. Or if you're good at machining, you'd be able to machine a point onto a bolt and just retread it just to make it tidy up. And then on the other side, what I do then, as I said, the battery tray, the bolts go through a bit of the battery tray there. And what I find is I have to loosen this to allow it a little bit. Allow it back a bit towards the tank. So when I have that tank on, I can then tighten up my battery. Keep all of that nice and snug in there. Nice and neat. And then the front one under here, we get our 13mm ratchet spanner, because I don't have any Imperial ratchet spanners, and this actually has a spring. So the spring is a bit too long, so I find sometimes I can't fit a washer on it. There's no room to thread. So the head of the coach bolt goes up into the tank, so I have to get a flathead screwdriver and push it back down. And then you can get your nothing. It's been a while since I had this tank off, so it's all coming back to me now. Lovely, there we go. And then on with our ratchet spanner. And that does it. The spring takes up the tension. You don't have to be worried about tightening it up too much. It's not going to go very far. And then we just have to put on our fuel pipe. Sometimes actually, to be honest, it's easier to fit this when the tank is loose. So you can move it. Something I try to remember to do, but usually forget to do. It seems to be kind of one of them things you always think of as the last job. But it's always a lot easier to fit it when you can move the tank. And that's just an 11/16. The pipe is turning, so I'll put my hand in as I'm typing. So I don't want that rubbing against the battery tray and wiring through or anything like that. I'll turn on our fuel, back on our distributor cap, make sure that screwdriver is out, of course. Screwdriver was in the hole but not right through the flywheel. We'll try it for a start. Now, we'll just see the things. It should sound a lot more tappety now, so it should. Fuel is on. bit of maintenance really. So I'm happy with that. It sounds good. No spitting or farting or misfiring. So there you go. A simple little bit of maintenance, and I had to fix the rocker cover leak. So when you take off the rocker cover, give things a bit of a clean in there like I did as well. I didn't record that, but always just give a degreaser wipe in around, and it was leaking all in there. You can see it was a bit dirty. So there you go. I can actually leave the heat shield off because I don't really I don't need it unless I'm burning kerosene, and try not to do that unless I have it running long enough. So we'll leave it there. Just a quick simple video on some maintenance on your Ferguson 35 or 20. It's all the same. I'll catch you in the next one.